The envelope was waiting in my mailbox like it had been there all along. No urgency, no warning, just a clean white HOA seal staring back at me like it belonged to my life now. My name is Jason Walker, and I own a lake ranch in northern Montana that most people only see on postcards. 70 acres of forest, water, and land my family has held for generations. Quiet place, private place, the kind of land that doesn't ask for attention until someone decides it does. I opened the envelope while standing on my porch, cold air cutting through the morning silence. Inside was a formal notice, HOA enforcement action. That alone made me stop, because there was no HOA on my property, at least not legally. I read the first line twice, then a third time. Notice of property compliance violation and intent to assume administrative control. I actually laughed, out loud, because that sentence didn't even sound legal. It sounded invented, but the next paragraph removed the humor. It stated that my lake ranch was now considered part of the Clearwater Lakes Community Association jurisdiction zone due to shared environmental boundary integration. Boundary integration, whatever that meant. Then came the part that made me go completely still. They were claiming authority over land use restrictions, dock access, shoreline control, and temporary administrative oversight. And at the bottom, a payment demand, $14,800 in association compliance fees. I stared at the paper, not confused, not even angry yet, just processing the sheer confidence of it. Someone had looked at a privately owned ranch and decided they could just absorb it. I walked down to the lake. Same path I had walked 1,000 times before. The water was still, perfectly still, like nothing outside had ever tried to touch it. That's when I saw it. A new sign, half installed near the tree line, metal frame, bright lettering, property under HOA Management Authority. I just stood there, looking at it, when moving through the trees, birds still flying overhead, nature completely unaware that someone had tried to administratively overwrite it. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't confusion. This was confidence. Someone believed this would work. I went back to the house and called the number on the notice. It rang twice, then answered. Clearwater Lakes HOA, a woman said. Professional tone, perfectly rehearsed. This is Jason Walker, I said, regarding the notice sent to my property. A pause. Then, oh yes, she said. We've been expecting your response. That line already bothered me. You're expecting a response for a land you don't own. I asked. Another pause. The HOA is currently updating jurisdiction boundaries, she said. That's not how ownership works. It is how compliance zones work. That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with a system. You put a sign on my land, I said, for community designation purposes. There is no community here, I replied, a soft sigh on the other end, like I was a difficult one. Mr. Walker, failure to comply will result in escalation. I almost smiled again. Almost. Escalate what exactly? I asked. Administrative enforcement procedures. That phrase again. Administrative enforcement. Like paperwork could override geography. I ended the call. Didn't argue further, because I already understood the direction this was going. And people like that don't stop when corrected. They stop when forced. That afternoon, I drove into town, met with the only attorney who handles land disputes in this region. Old office, wood furniture, stacks of file that looked older than me. He listened without interrupting. Didn't react much. Just read, then read again. Finally, he leaned back. This is bold, he said. That's one way to put it. They are claiming jurisdiction over private land based on environmental adjacency. Is that legal? I asked. He smiled slightly. No, that was reassuring, but not enough. However, he continued, if you ignore it, they'll escalate until someone stops them. So this isn't about law. It's about pressure. That word again. Pressure. He tapped the document. But there's something they missed. What? He looked at me. Your land title. That got my attention. What about it? If what you say is correct, they didn't check ownership record before issuing this. Why would they? He smiled again, because they assumed no one would challenge them. That was the second time I'd heard that today, and both times it sounded like a mistake. A big one. I left his office with one instruction. Don't respond yet. Collect everything. Let them commit further. Because in cases like this, the more they push, the more they expose. That night, I stood by the lake again. Same water, same silence. But now it felt different. Not peaceful, not threatened, just waiting. And I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. This wasn't about land. It was about control. And someone had just tried to control something that had never been controlled before. Not successfully. Not yet. I didn't get a second letter. I got a convoy. 2 white SUVs rolled up the gravel road just after noon. Slow. Intentional. Like they wanted me to see them coming. Like they expected compliance before conversation. I was down by the dock when I saw them. The lake was calm. Too calm for what was about to happen. The first SUV stopped near the gate. The second parked behind it. Doors opened at the same time. Coordinated. Professional. Like this wasn't their first attempt at taking control of something that didn't belong to them. 3 people stepped out. The woman from the phone call was in front. HOA representative. Clipboard again. Of course. Behind her, 2 men carrying folders and a measuring device. Survey-style equipment. Like they were preparing to redefine reality with paperwork and tape measures. They walked onto my property without hesitation. No knock, no call, no permission. That's when I moved from the dock. Slowly, not aggressive, just present. Stop right there, I said. They didn't. Not immediately. That told me everything I needed to know about how far they thought this would go. The woman smiled slightly, like I was a formality she expected to deal with. Mr. Walker, she said, we're here to finalize boundary integration. I looked at her, then at the men behind her. There's no boundary integration, I said. This is private property. She flipped open her clipboard, didn't even hesitate. According to HOA environmental zoning expansion records, this lakefront zone is classified as shared compliance territory. That phrase again, shared compliance territory, like repeating it made it real. You can't reclassify private land, I said. We're not reclassifying, she replied. We're documenting existing governance. That's when I understood the structure of what I was dealing with. They weren't asking. They were recording their assumption as fact. One of the men walked toward the shoreline, pulled out a measuring wheel, started rolling it, right across my land. I stepped forward immediately. Put that down. He glanced at the HOA rep. She nodded slightly. He kept going. That was the moment it stopped being confusing. It became intentional trespass with paperwork attached. I pulled my phone out, hit record. Not the first time today, and probably not the last. You're trespassing, I said clearly. The woman sighed, not concerned, annoyed, like I was delaying something she already considered done. We've informed legal channels, she said. That doesn't give you access to my land. She finally looked at me directly. Mr. Walker, resistance will result in escalation. I almost laughed again, because that word, escalation, was starting to sound like their favorite excuse for everything. What exactly are you escalating? I asked. Compliance enforcement procedures. The men kept walking, surveying, marking, measuring. I stepped between them and the shoreline, not aggressively, just firmly. Last warning, I said. The HOA rep finally changed tone slightly. Not fear, not doubt, just irritation slipping into control. You are obstructing an authorized assessment. There is no authorization, I replied. She tapped her clipboard. It has been filed. With who? She hesitated for half a second, just long enough. That's when I realized something important. They didn't have external approval. They had internal assumption, and they were treating it like law. I lowered my phone slightly. You're going to leave my property, I said. No response. The measuring wheel kept moving. That was it. I dialed 911. Not dramatic, not emotional, just factual. Yeah, I said into the phone. I have trespassers on my private land refusing to leave. That got their attention. The HOA rep looked up sharply. "You don't need to do that," she said quickly. "Yes," I replied. "I do." For the first time, she hesitated, just slightly, because police don't care about HOA authority. They care about land ownership, consent, law. And suddenly, she wasn't as certain. The men stopped measuring, looked at her, waiting for direction. She didn't give one immediately. That pause mattered, because systems built on assumed authority collapse fast when questioned in real time. Then she spoke again. "This is being handled administratively," she said. "It's being handled legally now," I replied. That was a difference, and she knew it. Sirens weren't close yet, but they were coming. And for the first time since it started, they weren't in control of the timeline anymore. The sirens didn't scream. They arrived steady, controlled, like the situation had already been categorized before the officers even stepped out. 2 patrol cars pulled up near the gate. Doors opened. 2 officers stepped onto the gravel, observing first, not reacting. That's always the part people underestimate. Police don't enter chaos first. They assess it. The HOA representative immediately stepped forward, clipboard raised like it meant something here. "Officers, this is a scheduled HOA compliance boundary assessment," she said quickly. The senior officer looked at her, then at the measuring wheel still sitting on my land, then at me. "Sir," he asked calmly, "is this your property?" "Yes," I said. "Deeded, registered, private land." That was all he needed for the first shift in tone. He turned back to her. "Do you have permission to be on this property?" She didn't answer immediately. That silence said more than anything she could have said. "We are acting under HOA jurisdiction expansion records," she finally replied. The officer didn't react to the words, just the legality. He said, "HOA documents do not grant access to private land without owner consent or legal order." That was the first crack. One of the survey men stepped back slightly. The other stopped recording measurements entirely. The confidence that walked in minutes ago was already dissolving. The officer looked at me again. "Do you want them removed?" he asked. "Yes," I said. Simple. No hesitation. He nodded once. "Then they need to leave the property." Now it was official. Not HOA interpretation. Law enforcement instruction. The HOA rep tried again. "This is an administrative misunderstanding." "No," the officer interrupted firmly. "This is trespassing if you do not leave." That word changed everything. Trespassing, not violation, not compliance issue. Trespassing. The men immediately stepped back toward their vehicle. No argument, no discussion, because once police define it, HOA authority stops existing in that moment. The representative stayed still for a second longer. Then her posture changed. Not confident anymore. Control frustration replacing certainty. "This will be escalated," she said. The officer didn't even look at her when he replied. "That's your right. Leave the property." She looked at me briefly, like she expected resistance, or negotiation, or fear. She found none, just a camera still recording, and a land title that didn't move. Slowly, she turned, walked back to the SUV. The men followed. No conversation now, just retreat. When they left, the silence that returned wasn't peaceful. It was corrected, like something wrong had been removed from the space. The officer stayed a moment longer. If they returned without legal authorization, he said, "Call us immediately." "I will," I replied. He nodded, then left, and just like that, it was over. Not dramatically, not loudly, just legally. I stood there near the shoreline again. The lake didn't change. The land didn't change. Nothing physical had shifted, but something important had, because the HOA didn't lose due to argument. They lost because they never had authority to begin with, and paperwork without jurisdiction is just paper. Later that evening, I got a final email, short, from their office. Boundary documentation under review. All enforcement activities suspended pending legal clarification. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. My land was never in question. Only their assumption was.